Got a Ryobi backpack blower. It'll start but only on choke, and it won't run on run. It'll run on choke and kind of towards the upper part of the white part. Now I'm just going to show you all how to clean the carburetor. Basically you take a star head here, a torch bit, and you just unscrew this bolt here, and then you unscrew this bolt under here. Not this bolt, you don't need to do that, that's just a choke lever, but this bolt here. And once these two bolts are out, that'll actually free the carburetor from the motor itself. And the only thing that will be holding on this carburetor will be the two fuel lines you see on top up there, and the throttle cable, that wire that runs on the left side down there. And that'll be the only thing holding that carburetor on, other than maybe like a little bit of gummed up stuff from this machine being a little older now. So sometimes they get tacked up. The gaskets in there turn almost glue-like, but not this one. So that's one thing to inspect also on these, is the gaskets, and make sure that everything is airtight, because any extra air that's not intended to go through there can mess up the way that it runs. So now you can see that's how the carburetor looks on the inside, but what we really need to clean is down in here, this portion in the float bowl area. It's got some small diaphragms in there, and those things will get clogged up pretty quick. Let's go ahead and take it apart and take a look at it. Forgive me, I'm filming with one hand, so there's 4 Phillips heads here that'll take off this primer bulb. And if your primer bulb is old, stiff, or busted or cracked, just go ahead and replace it while you're taking all this apart. Now that all 4 of those bolts are loose, any gas that's inside of that float bowl or that bubble primer bulb will just kind of fall out and drip down your tailgate, but that doesn't matter, it'll evaporate in no time. This right here is the first place you're going to want to inspect for any debris. So I'm just going to take off the primer bulb part first. Go ahead and take that off. Sorry, I'm one-handed right now, so forgive me, but that's the diaphragm I was telling you about, and debris will get clogged in there. Keep order on this part here. You don't want to lose track of how these things are connected. But basically you're going to inspect that, and you're going to inspect between there and make sure there's no debris in there. You need to do a visual inspection of this diaphragm and make sure that there's no tears in it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this diaphragm, but it is going to be stuck, fellas. And you have to be careful because you will tear it, as you can see up in that top corner. But as long as you don't damage the diaphragm itself, it should be fine. You're going to want to inspect this diaphragm for debris, and then take a good look inside of here. This right here is what tells the gas to stop coming into the carburetor or to keep on coming. Now the best way to be sure this is all clean is to just push, make sure it moves freely, just gently, nothing hard. Make sure it's moving freely, and then if you have some carb cleaner with a nice needle tip on it that you can really be precise, spray all in here, and just do a visual inspection, make sure there's no debris in this. Each of these are portholes. They could be portholes, hard to tell, but I've seen it on other carburetors. And then obviously up in here, and just inspect. I wouldn't adjust anything. That screw right there, that's just a keeper screw that holds all this mechanism in place, so there's nothing to really adjust. But be careful when you're pushing on this that you don't bend it, or basically you are adjusting that carburetor, so don't do that. It's hard to get it back the way it's supposed to be if you mess it up. Once I've done that inspection, I typically put that portion of the carburetor back together because it looks to be okay. Put the diaphragm back on, and then put the primer ball on top. That small hole you see at the very top, dead middle of the screen right now, lines up with the small hole on the top of the 4 bolts up there, like so. Now take this portion apart and inspect. More diaphragms and stuff in there, so be careful. Now let's inspect under here. Now this one's really hard to peel off, guys, so you might want to go ahead and pre-buy a new seal and gasket and a replacement kit for this carburetor beforehand. But I did see a little bit of residual gunk that probably was from leftover gas in the carburetor, but not enough to startle me. I'm going to slap it all back together. Let's see if it runs better now. With everything stuck back together, those 4 screws will pull everything tight again. So even though my seals and gaskets had some tears and damages, all the material is still there, so it should create enough of a barrier to prevent any extra gas from leaking out. You also want to inspect this O-ring in here around the outer part, and then inspect right in there. And then if all this fails and it for some reason doesn't want to start, we'll go over some other ideas on how you can maybe restore a properly running blower. Something else to inspect is that you see where the carburetor mounts there, you have a big hole and then you have a slot below. that slot or tic-tac shaped section is what actually pumps that carburetor and gets it flowing. Exhaust gases are released into the carburetor through this small hole right here, right there, and those exhaust gases pump those diaphragms, and actually, so this thing is almost fuel injected in a way. You typically don't have to clean the carburetor on these blowers unless for some reason you have left fuel in them over winter or a long duration, or if perhaps you inherited a blower that somebody hadn't used in a long time. Then carburetors can get clogged up from the fuel. A lot of times ethanol fuel will turn into like a jelly and cause these carburetors to get clogged. There's a much simpler way to check the fuel issue on this blower, and just simply check from the first video I showed about this blower on whether you have water in your gas, because that's a really common problem if you use cans of gas like you see in the back of my truck there. Those cans of gas get rainwater, especially in the tip, and people aren't paying attention when they pour, and that water goes right into the gas. But this was able to fix our blower. It wasn't actually the cleaning the carburetor part, it was just getting the water out. It was basically trying to run on water, and we know that a blower will not run on water. It needs gas. If this was of any help to you, please help me. Thank you very much. So basically, once we got the water out of the fuel, and I can show you a full tutorial on how to get the water out of your fuel, this blower started up in one pull. Main difference, now it won't run on choke, it'll only run on run, whereas before it would only run on choke, and that's because it was running on gas. Watery gas. Alright, here you go, do your